Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Google's search engine is among, or maybe the most powerful machine in human history. It's probably the most influential. Its results shape the way we understand the world. Most of us assume that on some level it is honest, Google search. But what if it's not honest? What if Google is secretly corrupting its search results to influence votes? Tonight we have exclusive evidence that that may in fact be happening at Google. We'll have the report for you in a minute. Don't miss that. We also have a can't-miss championship edition of Final Exams. Shannon Bream and Katie Pavlich for the belt coming up as well. But first tonight, the claim against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh that he committed some kind of sexual assault while a student in high school has metastasized into something different, something ugly, and something threatening to all of us. We've learned remarkably little about Brett Kavanaugh or Christine Ford in the past week, despite a lot of words on their behalf. The facts of the case are still sparse and they're murky. But we've learned a disturbing amount about the left and what it's willing to do in order to maintain control of this country. Watch a clip from today in which New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand explained why she knows Brett Kavanaugh is guilty. Watch.
I believe her because she's telling the truth. She is asking the FBI to investigate her claims. She is asking for that kind of review, that investigative work, that oversight, that accountability, because she's telling the truth. Someone who is lying does not ask the FBI to investigate their claims. Who is not asking the FBI to investigate these claims? The White House. Judge Kavanaugh has not asked to have the FBI review these claims. Is that the reaction of an innocent person? It is not.
So try to ignore the yelling there and the theatrics and the pure demagoguery of the moment and focus instead on Kirsten Gillibrand's reasoning, to the extent that there is any. Quote, I believe her because she's telling the truth. Or put another way, it's true because it is. Now in logic class they call this circular reasoning, which isn't actually reasoning at all. Instead it's simply a demand that you believe something because someone else is asserting it. Children talk this way. You'd think a U.S. Senator would be embarrassed to. But it's the second part of Gillibrand's statement that you ought to pay attention to because it's scary. Kavanaugh hasn't called for yet another FBI investigation into himself. Therefore, Senator Gillibrand says he did it. Is that the reaction of an innocent person, she thunders? It is not. Well, not since the McCarthy era, almost 70 years ago, have lawmakers talked like this in this country. Unless you call for an FBI investigation of yourself, you're guilty of a crime. Even Joe McCarthy himself never said anything like that. It was too reckless even for him. And now one of the Democratic Party's leading presidential candidates casually drops the line at a press conference, and the media hardly notice. So apparently that's the new standard in Washington. Okay, well, let's start with Kirsten Gillibrand. Gillibrand was a friend of Harvey Weinstein's. Here's a picture of the two of them together. Weinstein has been credibly accused of rape. Did Kirsten Gillibrand know about Weinstein's sexual assaults? Was she an accessory to them? We've asked those questions before in this show, but we never got an answer. Why hasn't Gillibrand demanded an FBI investigation into herself to clear that up? Is that the reaction of an innocent person? By her standards, it's not. So bring on the FBI. Let them interview Kirsten Gillibrand under oath. Maybe surprise her at her home at dawn with a search warrant. And while they're at it, they should take a very close look at her relationship with Bill Clinton, another accused rapist. No doubt the Senate will beg for an investigation into that too, assuming she's innocent. If she hesitates, press charges. This is lunatic. Sober liberals understand that it is. Democrats don't want Brett Kavanaugh on the court because they disagree with him. And that's understandable, by the way. They're angry that the Republican Senate refused to vote on Barack Obama's last Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland. That's understandable, too. But what's happening now is dangerous in a way that has nothing to do with politics. It's a threat to the civil liberties of every American, no matter who you voted for in 2016. Extremism has exploded on the left, and nobody is trying to contain it. Here's one particularly jarring example of that. This is Congressman John Garamendi of California. We know him well. He's one of the few House Democrats willing to come on this show. We don't usually agree with Garamendi, but we've always found him to be a decent and reasonable person, always. Here's what he just said about the Kavanaugh allegations.
Women across this nation should be outraged at what these white men senators are doing to this woman. The senators, the male senators who control that committee, are playing the game as old as an assault. And that is, the woman's the accused. The woman is at fault.
Wait a second. What does the race of specific senators have to do with any of this? Should we be angry at them because of their skin color? Should we distrust them more? Are they inherently less fair or less decent because of the way they look? Garamendi is implying exactly that. So how is that different or better than anything George Wallace ever said? Well, it's not, except that suddenly this filth is everywhere, so you hardly even notice it. The last thing this country needs right now is more racial division. Democrats are pushing it anyway. They're using allegations that have literally nothing to do with race at all. But splitting the country into tiny warring groups is useful to them. It helps them maintain their power, and so they're happy to do it. Men against women, black against white, divide and conquer, whatever it takes. In the end, it's unlikely that we'll ever know conclusively what happened between Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Ford 36 years ago, if anything at all. But it's crystal clear what's happening right now. This is a power grab. It is hurting the country, destroying our centuries-old traditions of justice, and empowering morons and demagogues. We ought to shut it down right now. And yet, and this is late-breaking news, just seconds before airtime we learned, that this may go on and on. Republicans on the Hill tonight are considering delaying the hearing scheduled for Monday. At this point, Brett Kavanaugh will be testifying by himself to some future date. Because of the rules of the Senate, that would push back the vote on Kavanaugh by at least a week, if not more, which is, of course, the whole point, to drag the country through this pointless charade, this circus which divides us and hurts us and degrades our standards of justice simply for political ends. That's where we are. Ian Samuel is a professor at Indiana University Law School, and he joins us tonight. Professor, I'm glad you're here as a law professor. I want to ask you about what Senator Gillibrand said today. She's a lawyer as well, I believe. And she said that the new standard is unless you call for an FBI investigation into yourself, you are by definition guilty. Is that a legal standard that you recognize?
Well, what I like to think about is if I were, as Brett Kavanaugh says, an innocent man, and if I were falsely accused of something this serious, what would I want? And I teach civil procedure and I think about criminal procedure, and as I think through that question, what I would want is a process that was regarded as so fair, even by my ideological adversaries, that I would live the rest of my life being able to point to the process and say, we had this out, and everyone can agree the way we did it was fair, and I was cleared. That's what I would want.
I would want that too, and I think we would both agree that the first thing you would want in that process is a full explanation of what the charges are from the person who's making them. And he hasn't received that. None of us have. But barring that, and I'm not attacking her, though I think all of us should be distressed that she's not explaining herself, but that's not what Gillibrand said. She said if you don't ask for an FBI investigation into yourself, that is an indication that you are guilty. And let me just suggest the obvious, which is that is insane. That is a third world standard. That is an un-American standard. And it's hard for me to believe that an elected U.S. senator would say something like that in public. You're not surprised by it, though.
Well, two things actually as to that. So, number one, if I were an innocent man, I would actually welcome the FBI investigating. I might not call for it, but I would say, sure, investigate. You will see that I'm an innocent man. But the second thing, when I was listening to you talk about this, you said, and you pointed out, I think quite correctly, many of the senior members of the Democratic Party are credibly associated with important sexual predators like Harvey Weinstein.
Sure.
And I thought what you were going to say was it would be a good idea to investigate that, which I do agree with. And it seems like you're kind of going in the opposite direction.
I don't really think of this
as a partisan issue.
Well, of course, it's not a partisan issue. The point that I am making is that guilt by association is a low and immoral tactic, and we used to revile people who engaged in it, like Senator Joe McCarthy of Wisconsin, and now it's so commonplace we don't notice it. And so the idea is if you've had dinner with somebody who has unsavory views or unpopular views, you can be fired, and we've seen people fired recently for that very thing. Guilt by association is not the same as guilt. And so to say that because Kirsten Gillibrand was friends with Harvey Weinstein, that she is somehow an accessory to his sexual predation is totally wrong. And I would never make that claim. I was merely saying that by the standard that she holds up,
it's not. That.
What I'm suggesting is that she shouldn't say that innocent people have a moral obligation to call down upon themselves an FBI investigation. That's insane. Why doesn't anyone stop her and say...
I quite agree with that.
Yes.
But if I were an innocent man, I wouldn't think of it as my obligation, but rather my privilege.
Well,
I would insist. If I were Brett Kavanaugh, and if I were an innocent man, I would insist on pointing every camera on God's green earth in my face as I denied these allegations if I were an innocent man, truthfully. I want everyone to see it, wouldn't you?
I believe he's already done that. I think he's been the subject of 6 FBI investigations into his background checks by federal agents, and I believe he's testifying Monday, and he'll likely repeat what he's already said, which is, I don't know what she's talking about. I didn't do this. She, by contrast, who is the reason we're having this conversation in the first place, leveled a charge of felonious behavior against a public official and then has refused to explain herself. So where's the onus on her? She's dragged the whole country into this and short-circuited a process the rest of us are vested in and not bothered to explain herself? I know you're not supposed to, attack the victim, but at some point, she's not in charge of this country. So why can't we ask her for the full story?
Well, I do think that, as we say often in the law, the government is entitled to every person's evidence. And I do think it would be very useful if she would testify. But again, just to keep with the frame a little bit, if I were Brett Kavanaugh, and if I were an innocent man, I would say, look, you don't want to testify on Monday, take a week, take 2 weeks, take a month. Because when this is done, and if I'm confirmed, I will not live my life under a cloud where people can say, well, the reason you got through is because we rushed it. Take a month. This is my life. That's what I would do if I were an innocent man.
But then if you were facing opponents who publicly declared that you were guilty on the basis of no evidence and used as evidence the fact that you didn't request an FBI investigation into yourself, you would acknowledge you're dealing with unreasonable people who don't care about justice, who are merely trying to destroy your life for political ends. So maybe you behave differently, or am I being crazy here?
Well, I don't know about that. If I were facing unreasonable people, and if I were an innocent man, what I would say is, fine, you want to delay the hearing a month? Delay it. You want the FBI to look into it? Look into it. You want to interview this witness in closed session,
can accuse me anonymously.
I'm an innocent man.
Yeah, Yeah, I wish we lived in a country. I'd be happy to participate in such a system, but when you have people saying what Kirsten Gillibrand said today, or Congressman Garamendi said today, you're dealing with unreasonable people who don't care about justice, and it's scary. And I know that you believe that.
Prosecutors often don't, and that is why it would be important, I would think, in his position, to position yourself as a person who says, these people are unreasonable, and the way I will prove it to you is I will give them everything they want, and they will find
I think he's
nothing.
doing that Monday.
I'm an innocent man, if I were an innocent man.
I think that's the claim. Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, our long-term investigation into Google and its behavior and practices has borne fruit tonight. We have internal documents that show Google employees plotting to use the company's search engine, the very core of its business, which has a monopoly on search in this country, to undermine the administration's immigration policy without telling you, secretively and dishonestly. That exclusive is next. The news has been overwhelming tonight. A very special break from the madness. Our two-time all-time champions face off in the ultimate final exam. They are, as you know, Shannon Bream and Katie Pavlich. Coming up. Tonight we have a development in our ongoing exclusive investigation into the behavior of Google. There are new emails first obtained by this show. Now, Google, as you know, is the most powerful company in the history of the world. Virtually all human information flows through its software, and for that reason, Google shapes much of how the world understands reality. At the heart of Google's business is its search engine, which has a virtual monopoly on search in this country and others. Google search succeeds because it is blindingly efficient, but also because it is perceived as honest. When you search for a term on Google, the most popular results come to the top. The process is straightforward and democratic. That's what most people think. That's how it's perceived. And that's why the world trusts Google. But what if Google was lying to you? What if the results that you got were secretly weighted to get you to vote a certain way, to believe a certain thing? That would affect a lot of people and a lot of votes. In fact, it would be impossible to have a real democracy under circumstances like that. A small number of incredibly rich people would be in charge of everything, including your perceptions. Well, that is a major concern for all of us because Google is a very political company. We recently showed you email evidence of a Google effort to collude with a left-wing group in support of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Now tonight we have internal documents that show that Google employees discussed corrupting the company's search engine to push propaganda on hundreds of millions of unsuspecting users. Here's what happened. Shortly after taking office, President Trump issued his now famous travel ban. Almost immediately after that, Google employees began plotting ways to undermine the president's executive order. On January 29th, a Google product marketing manager named Mackenzie Thomas sent an email to a group of fellow employees. Quote, "There is a large brainstorm going on throughout the marketing org," she wrote, brainstorming about how to respond to Trump's order. Among Thomas's ideas was, quote, to actively counter algorithmically biased results for search terms such as Islam, Iran, Mexico, Latino, and so forth. In other words, Google employees wanted to alter the search results to make them more positive in certain cases for political reasons. Thomas also suggested promoting links for making donations to organizations fighting the travel ban. This, of course, would be completely dishonest and unethical behavior, but Thomas's colleagues at Google seemed to approve of it strongly. Product manager Rami Bana, for example, replied this way, quote, "We're absolutely in, Mackenzie, anything you need. We'll put together a list of orgs with Merrill and HL team." Another employee named Stacy Chen added that groups she thought Google should promote included the ACLU, the Immigration Defense Project, the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, and the National Immigration Law Center. All of those groups were at the time agitating against the president's immigration ban. Even at least one person on the chain seemed to realize how dangerous and out of the ordinary this conversation was. A Google employee called Clement Wolf commented that he was, quote, "very much in favor of Google stepping up, but was wondering, quote, how partisan we want to be on this. To the extent of my knowledge, we'd be breaching precedent if we only gave highlights access to organizations that support a certain view." We contacted Google about these remarkable emails, and the reply to us is here in full, quote, "These emails were just a brainstorm of ideas, none of which were ever implemented. Google has never manipulated its search results or modified any of its products to promote a particular political ideology, not in the current campaign season, not during the 2016 election, and not in the aftermath of President Trump's executive order on immigration. Our processes and policies would not have allowed for any manipulation of search results to promote political ideologies," end quote. Left unanswered by Google was why anyone would believe that statement for a second. Nor did Google say anything about the employees on that email chain. Presumably they still work at Google, which is remarkable. If you ran a bank and caught your tellers brainstorming about how to rob the vault, would they still work for you? Remember that Google fired an engineer called James Damore last summer almost instantly. The CEO flew back from family vacation to fire him. Why? Because Damore was caught expressing mildly conservative ideas in a private memo. Here, Google employees are plotting to subvert our entire public conversation secretly, but that's fine with Google. It shouldn't be fine with any of us or with the U.S. Congress. Google executives are scheduled to testify on Capitol Hill next week. The scheduled topic is privacy, but it would be nice if at least one elected representative asked about this, because it's much scarier than anything Russia ever attempted. Peter Schweitzer wrote Clinton Cash. He now has a fantastic new documentary called The Creepy Line about big tech, and he joins us tonight. Are you surprised by this?
Not really. It's just further confirmation that Google has been cooking the books as it relates to search. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this would be like a company having a brainstorming session on how we're going to fiddle with the books in accounting. Then you're going to step back and say, no, we were just having a brainstorming session. It speaks to the culture of the company. And the culture of the company is they are prepared to put their thumb on the scale and shift the debate in favor of the direction that they want to go.
But this is so corrupt that it's,
Yes.
I was stunned by it, and I was worried that these emails were not authentic because it's such a big, so search is the core of Google's business. It's many different things, Google, but basically it's a search engine. It was built on the back of one.
Yeah.
And the promise has always been that they're not lying to you.
Right.
But they are.
That's right. And this is really the third strike as far as I'm concerned. The first strike, of course, is the commercial search. When travel websites and people like Yelp were complaining that they were, tilting the algorithm against them to others, Google said, absolutely not. We would never do that. We now know the Federal Trade Commission, the EU, and others have looked at this and said Google was fiddling with the algorithm. The second strike, as far as I'm concerned, was the work done by Dr. Robert Epstein, which shows clearly in 2016 that search was tilted to favor Hillary Clinton. This is strike three. It shows that the culture of the company is such that they're very happy having a free and open conversation about manipulating the algorithm on a highly political
subject. But I don't
subject.
understand. I mean, so people go to jail for violating our campaign and finance laws because they put an extra ad on some cable channel nobody watches.
Right.
This is the most powerful company in the world.
That's right.
How can we have a democracy in a country where Google can just get whoever it wants elected by lying to us through the search function?
It's a great example, Tucker, of regulations and campaign finance laws not keeping up at all with where we are in technology. Nobody would have conceived when we passed laws about in-kind contributions to campaign from companies that something like this would happen. But this is the ultimate campaign contribution. This is not like, Exxon giving gasoline to a political campaign. This is a company secretly tipping the scales in favor of candidates or causes or beliefs that they have. It's done in secret. We don't know how extensive it's happening. And 80 to 90% of search in the world is basically done through Google. So they have complete dominance in this area.
And the Congress does nothing. And I can think of at least one Republican senator who I believe has been bought off by Google. I don't think he's alone.
Yeah.
And at some point it might be worth naming who those people are. Peter, great to see you.
Thanks, Tucker.
We're not going to stop this investigation into Google or any of the other tech companies that increasingly seem to determine the direction of this country. Well, a Republican Senate candidate is being denounced as a would-be theocrat for saying that men have a duty to lead. He joins us to rebut his critics after the break. Well, one of the pivotal facts of modern American life is that the country, and particularly its cities, are pretty safe. They weren't always safe, but for about the last 20 years, the murder rate has gone down. Now, sadly, it is rising again. But it's not surprising. For years, the left has been denouncing the cops as bigots, all of them. Just the other day, Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke in Texas called police, quote, the new Jim Crow, and claimed they shoot people just because of the color of their skin. So think to yourself and be honest. Would you want to be a cop right now? Who would want to be a cop? Why would you want to risk your life to protect the public for very little pay? Well, some moron like Beto O'Rourke, who's never even met you, knows nothing about you, calls you a bigot just because of the uniform you wear. It wouldn't be worth it for you, probably. It's not worth it for a lot of people. For that, among other reasons, American cities are becoming less safe. Much less safe in some cases. Yesterday, Attorney General Jeff Sessions went to Chicago. It's one of the cities hardest hit by this trend. He laid out very clearly why more Americans are getting killed in big cities. Watch.
The professors who studied Chicago called it the ACLU effect. Policing went down, crime went up. So there's a clear lesson here. If you want more shootings, more death, listen to the ACLU, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and groups who do not know the reality of policing.
The funny thing is that most of these changes have taken place under the pretext of civil liberties, and yet the people pushing them don't care about civil liberties, certainly not your civil liberties, in case you haven't noticed. They're the ones telling you if you don't call an FBI investigation down on yourself, you must be guilty, these civil libertarians. If you're older than 35, you may remember when America's great cities depopulated, essentially, practically destroyed by blight. That was definitely true here in Washington, certainly in New York City. They recovered, and real estate boomed, and lots of people became happy and didn't die because they became safer. What happens when they get dangerous again, as they are? The left doesn't seem to care at all. Michigan Republican Senate candidate John James is coming under fire for expressing an idea that leadership can be a masculine responsibility. Watch this.
Men, we have a charge to lead. And we are failing in that because we are afraid to hurt someone's feelings. The fact of the matter is women want men who've been tested. And boys need to be tested.
So women like strong men. Well, don't just ask that guy. Ask anybody who's ever studied the subject. There are reams of social science on this question, and most Americans think it sounds sensible. But just for uttering these words, one writer at the Detroit Metro Times has accused James of seeking a Handmaid's Tale-style theocracy. John James joins us tonight. Ms. James, thank you very much for coming on. So before we get to what your critics are saying about you, why don't you tell us what you were saying when you uttered those words?
Absolutely. I was raised in the church, and I know, based upon my priorities, which is God and country in that order, I also recognize we talk a lot about rights in this country, but not enough about responsibilities. I believe that we all have to step up. We are all created equal, male and female, but I truly believe, because of how I was raised, that men have an obligation to step up and not abandon their family responsibilities, to step up and be role models and mentors in their community. And when I was talking to a faith-based business organization, talking to men, talking about stepping up in their communities and holding themselves accountable to be mentors, the reason is, right now, the left has very little way to attack me other than take things out of context or just flat out lie. I'm not going to fit in anybody's blue box or anybody's red box. I'm a conservative who believes very, very strongly in faith and family, God and country, and service before self. That's why I went off to serve my country in Iraq. That's why I came back to build up my community right here in Detroit. And that's why I'm going to go to Washington and continue to serve my state.
So just to be clear, you think that men should take care of the families they create, and for that you're some kind of Ayatollah?
Imagine that. I think that right now, particularly in the African American community, I believe that if I can be frank, and I know I can be on this show, that the overwhelming number of African American females having children are doing so and managing their role and responsibility as a single parent. I believe that men need to step up, and that's what I was talking about. And the left attacking me for that just proves that their business model is dependent upon keeping black folks dependent and in debt, and keeping them in the situation so they can make sure that they depend on the left for their vote. I'm not talking about left or right. I'm not talking about black or white. I'm talking about the right thing, a message of economic opportunity where we focus on early childhood development, K through 12 education, but you have people here who talk a good game and talk about fixing the school system here, talk about getting people out of their blight and their socioeconomic downtrodden state, but then you have the ACLU who continues to allow these things to get in the way. And I'm about creating freedom and opportunity for everyone, particularly in my community here in Detroit.
Good for you. Families are a threat to them. Married people vote Republican. They hate the family as a result. That's the truth, and I hope you'll keep telling it. Thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Megyn Kelly had some brave and insightful words about the chaos surrounding Brett Kavanaugh. We'll show them to you in just a minute. Mark Stein here to react to all that. But first, the questions have been chosen. The crown is in place. The champagne is cooling. It is time for the ultimate final exam. Shannon Bream versus Katie Pavlich in a cage match to determine who wears the tiara. Up next. Time now for Final Exam. News has bumped this segment off the air for the past couple weeks, but not tonight. This is the contest where we pit news professionals against one another to see who's been paying the most attention to the news in the last week. This week, the biggest show of all, the showdown. Last year, Fox News at Night host Shannon Bream pulled off a full Brady Bunch. She beat 9 opponents in a row. Now, Town Hall's Katie Pavlich has matched that feat. So naturally, as Pavlich goes for win number 10, her challenger is Shannon Bream. The winner will be crowned the ultimate Final Exam champion. And by the way, since this segment has done so well, we've upped our budget. Our own Vanna White, Emily Lynn joins us now with glasses of vodka or sparkling cider or whatever to toast
Thank you.
tonight's contest before we get started.
Fancy. This is very
These are yours to keep. These are our final exam. Why, thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
These are our final exam glasses. That's right. I'm the Ryan Seacrest. Okay, are you all ready?
We're ready. It smells suspicious. Okay. By the way, did you notice we both beat Peter Ducey?
Cider.
What a glutton for punishment.
We did?
He was both of our
team player.
But you know what?
He's a good guy. He's
no
a team
one should
player.
be ashamed to lose to either one of you because you're that good at this game. I have not looked at the questions, by the way, sincerely.
They're all on Kavanaugh, though, right?
I want to be
because if they're not, I don't know about anything else that's happening in the world but
conspiracy show. All right, you know the rules, but I'm going to repeat them for our audience. Hands on buzzers. I ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer the question. You must wait until I finish asking it in order to answer it. You can answer once I acknowledge you by saying your name. Each correct answer is worth a single point. If you get it wrong, you lose a point from your total. Best of 5 wins. Dim the lights. Let's get started.
Okay. Where's your theme music?
Question, it's implied. Oh, there it is.
Okay, there it is. Okay, all right.
Question 1. The Emmys aired on Monday night. It was the same boring award show it always is, except with one exception. Upon accepting his Emmy, director Glenn Weiss did something unusual on stage. What was it? Shannon Bream.
He proposed to his girlfriend.
On the air?
on the TVs.
Maybe I should have watched. Did he propose to his girlfriend? Roll tape, please.
You are the sunshine in my life. You wonder why I don't like to call you my girlfriend? Because I want to call you my wife.
Good thing she
Will
said
you marry
yes.
me?
Yeah. What did you say? No. Tucker, even you got teared up.
I was going to say, I've never watched the Emmys, but if they do that, I'm going to watch them.
Okay.
I like that. I like marriage. Question 2. A cyclist in the Commonwealth of Virginia who did something very rude to President Trump's motorcade while it passed by her last year is now running for office. She lost her job as a result of the original incident. What did she do to the president's motorcade? Something rude to the president's motorcade. Katie.
She flipped him off.
Flipped him off.
Yeah.
The bird, the finger. Did she flip them off?
Made headlines after this photo capturing her giving the president's motorcade the bird. That
Good
woman
guess.
now is running for office.
I got really motivated. The first thing I did was sign up to volunteer at the
All about
polls
civility,
the
I'm
next
sure.
week at
That's
the
her campaign
2017
platform.
election.
Yeah. I thought it was that or mooning.
Yeah, I was
not
mooning
sure,
too.
but
I almost said mooning.
You must have gotten double 800s in the SAT because you're the best
Oh,
guesser
no, I
I've
failed the
ever.
SAT,
Oh, well.
for sure.
Oh,
Should have been
see, that
penalty.
proves,
Sorry, Mom and
that
Dad.
proves those are no good. Those tests are no good.
1-1 going into question 3. The question may offend vegans, vegetarians, and anyone who works at PETA. So turn off your TV if you're in those categories. Chefs at a seafood restaurant in the state of Maine say they want to show compassion to the lobsters they're about to boil. Before going into the pot, the lobsters are given what to relax? Shannon Bream.
Marijuana smoke.
No way.
I mean, I hope it's true, but then what happens to the lobster? If you eat it, are you in trouble?
Okay,
It's like
is
a
it
brownie.
marijuana? It's Maine. You never know. Is it marijuana smoke on the lobsters?
A seafood restaurant in Maine is now getting lobsters stoned to kill them in a more humane way. Yes, instead of being freaked out by boiling water, the lobsters now OD on Chex Party Mix.
Wow.
Chex Party mix for the
There's something
lobsters.
kind of
How do
even
you eat that with
sadder
your
about
claws?
that.
I know.
It's acknowledging
but are they
the
happy
pain.
when they go bye-bye?
You know, they don't know what's happening.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're certainly more passive.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Question 4, this one's a multiple choice.
Oh.
There was a lot of rain in New York City recently, and that caused some subway stations to flood. Now there's a video on the internet of an animal protecting itself from rising water on the train platform. The animal has been given a nickname. Is it rain raccoon, flood rat, or puddle pigeon? Shannon Bream.
Flood rats,
Flood rat.
I think.
Is it flood rat?
Probably.
In New York, a rat
this
has
made me
become
sad.
famous. The
Rats,
rodent
yeah.
has taken the internet by storm,
It's a rat,
dubbed
too.
Flood Rat,
I
after he
actually
was
feel
caught
bad
on
for
video
him.
shielding
Don't
himself.
feel
He's at the bottom of the screens
feel
there
bad for him.
on a subway platform. We just had to show it to you. You can just make him out right there.
Okay.
I feel like he's scared.
Read your one.
I feel like
Shannon, it's a rodent.
You're both such nice people, but you don't need to feel sorry for the rats in the subway.
I do.
He carries
All right,
the plate.
final question. An Arby's restaurant in the state of California just announced they will give you a free sandwich for life if you show your dedication to the restaurant in what very permanent way? Katie Pavlik.
You get a tattoo.
An Arby's tattoo?
Yeah, an Arby's tattoo.
A high price for a sandwich.
It
Is
is.
it an Arby's tattoo?
Arby's has announced they'll be giving out free Arby's tattoos in California this weekend to their
Free
most
tattoo?
dedicated
You didn't have
fans.
to pay for
Wow. Said 1 minute. Oh,
And free
no. What
sandwiches.
did I do last night?
This really was the battle of champions.
Congratulations,
1 point.
Shannon.
Nice game, Katie.
Good game.
Shannon Bream, you are now
Thank
and
you,
forever
my
the
friends.
champion.
Listen, no one in this network can beat the two of us.
That's true.
together. I mean,
So,
we combine our
I
forces.
want to ask our Vanna Whites. This is Louie.
Shannon is
Emily.
the only one worthy of wearing a crown.
You get the
That is
sash.
for sure.
Oh, and not the first in your life either.
Do you need a
I'm a
tissue?
professional at this.
And there you go. Emily has the crown.
Oh, no.
You are our winner, Shannon
We
Bream.
need some music, some Miss America.
Wear that. Wear that with pride.
Congratulations.
And let that
Thank
be an
you.
inspiration to you at home to
Yes.
follow the news more closely every week and come back next week to score as well as Shannon and Katie.
Goodbye.
We'll be back next Thursday.
Goodbye.
See you then. Democrats hid Christine Blasey Ford's letter for months. She asked for anonymity. She didn't want her name out there. They leaked her name and the letter at the last minute for political gain. Now they're trying to dictate the terms for how Washington responds to her allegations in order to achieve further delays. Megyn Kelly at NBC News called out that strategy in the clearest possible terms earlier today. Watch what she said.
I think Dr. Ford is running out of options. I think she needs to show up on Monday and offer her testimony if she wants to be heard, because for better or for worse, she is not in charge of this. The Senate is in charge of this. That committee's in charge of this.
Imagine saying that on NBC News. That's what bravery looks like. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight. So, look, I mean no disrespect to the woman lodging the complaint, making the allegation. I take her testimony. I think she's sincere, I guess is what. But is she in charge of the process and the country?
No, nobody has the right to do this. You say she's the person making the complaint. She hasn't actually made a complaint. She's actually the only person in this story now who hasn't actually made a statement under oath, because even these letters that Kavanaugh's friend Mark Judge sent to the Judiciary Committee, that's made under penalty of perjury. So you can't, if you have a complaint, you have to walk into a police station and make the complaint, and the police interview you. The police won't investigate somebody if you're not even prepared to come into the police station and tell your story. And that's how it should be. Kirsten Gillibrand, who, as you said, is a lawyer. Half these legislators are lawyers, and the other half all have lawyers on their vast bloated entourages, want us to live in a world where anyone can call down an FBI investigation on anybody else. Well, if that's the way we're going to live, I'm pretty certain it was Kirsten Gillibrand who busted into my car in 1998 and stole my car radio. And if she's innocent, she'll be calling for an FBI investigation into herself. Let's bring it on, baby. Let's have it. Let's have it for everyone.
Let me just preemptively counter the attacks you're going to face from the mindless, shrieking, dishonest harpies on the left and the robotic water carriers in the media. You're attacking the victim. I just want to be clear. Nobody's attacking the victim here. But does this work for any other species of crime? Can I anonymously accuse you of embezzlement or armed robbery and then not elaborate on the accusation while your reputation is destroyed and you lose your job? Does that work?
No, a criminal accusation is a serious thing. A criminal accusation 36 years on is an even more serious thing. And if you took it seriously, you wouldn't, for example, just send the letter to one political party. You'd have sent it to both Dianne Feinstein and to Chuck Grassley. But this is actually going. You know, the presumption of innocence is at the bedrock of our judicial system. And so if you're just prepared to trash someone, and we now have people in the Democrat Party, Cory Booker boasted that he groped someone at high school. And we shouldn't just be having one set of rules for one party, and for the other side you can trash them and demean them and degrade them and destroy them at their reputation. And if they don't want an FBI investigation, they're to blame.
The great Mark Steyn. Thank you, Mark. Richard Painter up next. He abandoned the Republican Party earlier this year to become a Democrat. Now that party is turning against him, and you won't believe why. That's next. We've had Richard Painter on a couple times to talk about dumpster fires, but that's not the topic tonight. The former Bush ethics lawyer became a Democrat in response to the rise of Donald Trump. Now he says he's being threatened by his new party, the Democrats, for asking questions about Keith Ellison. He's the DNC deputy chair accused of abuse by an ex-girlfriend. Richard Painter joins us tonight. Richard, I wish we had more time. We've got completely squeezed by all this news. But lay out for us this story. You've asked questions about Ellison. What was the response you got from your party?
Well, first, I think they're trying to run the clock to the election instead of having an investigation. It's been weeks. I also complained back in May about the DFL's failure to investigate harassment of a gay man in the 8th Congressional District. He wrote a very detailed email describing very explicit harassment in 2016. That was just swept under the rug. And I finally wrote the DFL chair, Ken Martin, and that man went public with that. And he, of course, Ken Martin's been furious with me, and I complained about that not being investigated. And then Ken Martin starts sending me emails saying he's going to, start considering legal action if I keep complaining about this. Well, my answer to this is that both political parties need to focus on cleaning up their own act before they start attacking the other party. There's a lot of covering up going on, and sexual harassment abuse, and all of these problems are being covered up by the Democrats as well as the Republicans. I find that very, very disappointing what happened here.
Well, it is
disappointing. I find very disappointing what's happening in Washington.
It's shocking. And I appreciate that. And we're going to follow up on that story because I think those are probably threads we should be pulling. Thanks a lot. Richard Painter joining us tonight, all too briefly. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, it's been an unbelievable and action-packed hour because this is an unbelievable and action-packed moment with an awful lot at stake. We're following it closely. We know you are too, and we are grateful that you're watching. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink, all of which are everywhere and hurting our country. Good night from Washington. Hannity, live from Las Vegas, where the president's about to speak. We've had Richard Painter on a couple times talk about dumpster fires, but that's not the topic tonight. The former Bush ethics lawyer became a Democrat in response to the rise of Donald Trump. Now he says he's being threatened by his new party, the Democrats, for asking questions about Keith Ellison. He's the DNC deputy chair accused of abuse by an ex-girlfriend. Richard Painter joins us tonight. Richard, I wish we had more time. We've got completely squeezed by all this news, but lay out for us this story. You've asked